All right, everybody, it is time. It is showtime. The Rob Tui theme is going to be winding down in the form of being cut off just right there mid song. Welcome everybody to Sunday night. It is 6 p.m. Pacific on the West Coast. That's when we do the show. This is episode 39 of All Things Fantasy Grounds Talk Show. Subject tonight is DM workflow. I'm going to share the screen and we're going to say hello to all the people that are with me. First of all, one of my co-hosts, Mr. Layroon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Just getting ready to get that one shot put together for the end of the month, and also working on our new website, in particular the knowledge database, and going to be teaching a character creation 101 this Tuesday.
All right, excellent. Everybody knows Layroon is the founder of Fantasy Grounds College, which is where that class will be. Furied Fate, the other co-host of the show. How are you?
I'm good, but now I'm distracted because of the thing we were talking about, which I'm now searching for.
Well, we can let everybody know. So there's a new Batman comic out, and apparently Batman's penis is in the show, or I mean in the comic book, and so everybody's trying to Google it now. It's all over the news. And before we say hello to our guest, I do. Speaking of Batman's penis, I do want to give our disclaimer, which is that all things Fantasy Grounds talk show is meant to teach and help, but the opinions stated by the four of us on the show are not that of Smiteworks USA LLC or Fantasy Grounds. It's just coming from us. And let's say
Unless somebody
hello.
from Smiteworks comes and says hi.
Right, then their opinion, then like yeah, like if Doug ever came on the show, knock wood, he's probably not going to do that for like a year, but he would then be, of course, his opinions would be maybe he would say no, I want my opinions to not be associated with the company, and then he might start swearing. Who knows what he's going to do? Anyway, we do have a special guest here with us tonight, Mr. Jacob McCarthy. How are you, sir?
Not bad, Rob. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Excellent. So let's get started. We are going to give away some fantastic prizes tonight. And before we get into our talk about DM workflow, we do want to mention that FGCon is coming up. That's October 12th through the 14th. Is that right, Layroon?
Yep.
And there is a special Fantasy Grounds component at FGCon. Do you want to talk a little bit about that for a second?
Yeah, the DM signups are pretty much done, and now the basically all of the players are starting to sign up. And what happens is during that time, Smiteworks switches on the license to have the ultimate license. So in other words, if you have like a standard license, he'll flip the switch so you can bring your friends and let them play and do all those kinds of things to kind of introduce the games out there to the rest of the world. So that's a really cool thing that they do for us.
Yeah, and so that
That is
happens a
awesome.
couple times a year, and it is awesome. During FGCon, though, Fury and I will be in Whistler, British Columbia, so we will not be able to participate, but that happens to be the same time as that's happening. But before we continue and get into the meat of our talk, we're going to give away a fantastic prize that Jake himself will tell us about a little later at the end of the show. But here at the beginning of the show, we would like to give away a copy of the Fantasy Grounds version of Lost Minds of Phandelver. And we specifically want to give this away to somebody who is a new DM or somebody who has a friend that is thinking about becoming a DM, because as everybody knows, Lost Mine of Phandelver is a really great introductory adventure, and it kind of walks the person through DMing it in a manner of speaking. So it's really nice. So I want to ask people to enter this if you yourself want to try to become a DM, or if you have a friend that you can give this prize to that wants to be a DM. But we're trying to have it be, I mean, there's nothing we can do from stopping people just entering it. We won't know, but that's the idea behind the prize, is that we definitely want it to be, and this is courtesy of Layroon and Fantasy Grounds College, who's paying for this particular prize. And so let me finish typing it in, Phandelver, and I will start the raffle, and we'll put like a 5-minute timer on it, and then we'll let that run while Jake is talking to us about DM workflow. And so why don't we start? And Jake, you can start with telling everybody who you are, and continue with all the information that you would like to give to us. Oh, and I will share Jake's screen so that everybody can see, because he does have visual aids as well.
Right on. Hello, everybody out there tuning into Rob's All Things Fantasy Ground talk show. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Jake McCarthy. I've been DMing for about 21 years now, and it's been a great experience. I've been fortunate to play a lot of editions of the game, play it all over the world, played it in Europe, played it in Asia when I was in the service. And it's actually been a huge part of my life. And to that end, I kind of want to just mention how I got into the game, because I think it's kind of unconventional, and it might explain why I'm not kind of 100% versed on all other things that satellite around D&D. So I'm kind of just focused on D&D. But so back when I was 15, I was using hallucinogenics a lot, and I kind of got in over my head with some LSD one time, and I ended up having a really bad overdose. And I don't mind telling you guys this, because if you go look it up in the newspapers or whatever, the incident was in there. But essentially, I found myself in a Narcotics Anonymous group, and my sponsor was like, you need to find something else to do. You need to find something to do that takes you away from drugs, and it takes you a long time to do it. And a buddy of mine was like, well, there's this game called Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And we got into it. He got me a Greyhawk set, was originally what he got me. And then they went and bought me the old TSR Black 2nd edition AD&D books. It wasn't the Monster Manual back then. It was the Monstrous Manual. And I don't know, ever since then, I just fell into it. It was a really awesome way for me to channel some of my creativity. I loved the collaborative storytelling element to it. And back then, I was a real adversarial DM. I've since transitioned to a facilitative DM, but it was definitely a lot of, okay, you guys versus me. I'm going to throw everything I can at you and see how it goes. But out of all the editions I've played, I'd have to say that 5th edition is probably my favorite edition. I love the fact that it was play tested by the community for such a long period of time. And there's elements of 2nd D&D and 3.5 and a little bit of 4th. I wasn't really a big fan of 4th, but I would have to say 5th is probably like my favorite edition. So I did want to say, if you guys have questions or anything, just let me know, or let Rob know, let Faerun
Yeah,
or
if you
Fury
guys
know.
have questions as we go, Jake's got about maybe a dozen or so sections of his presentation today. And so what we'll do is, if you guys have questions, we'll try and monitor them in the chat. And then as he comes to a natural break, we'll squeeze the questions in. So if you guys have them, just go ahead and put them in the chat.
Absolutely. So, but as far as DMing is concerned, I really kind of wanted to just go over the hardware and the software that I use, how I've integrated technology back from when I used to do it just on pen and paper, incorporating all this new technology into it, and then just like what I do. And I just want to stress right now, I'm not here evangelizing my process. I'm just sharing it. It's not the way, it's just a way. And I encourage everyone to, there's always two things you can learn from people. You can learn what to do or what not to do. So you can listen to this whole thing and go, that guy's an idiot. I'm not listening to a word he says. But if you want to take what I'm doing and make it your own, by all means, I highly, highly, highly encourage that. So there's no wrong way to DM as long as you're having a good time. But as far as like the hardware and software that I use, I've been a professional creator for about almost as long as I've been DMing. And a lot of it was just in like corporate, military, industrial complex type of stuff. But it's really nice to be able to bring those skills in to create assets for my player base. That way they're getting, like if you play a DM game, if I DM a game for you, you get a very similar WotC style quality of graphics and presentation and content that you would if you were to buy a pre-made adventure. Because I'm bringing in that at least I think so, and my players like to think so, because I'm bringing in those same skill sets that those guys use, and I'm using the exact same software that Wizards of the Coast and other publishing companies are using, because it's just industry standard kind of stuff. So, but so the software I like to use, obviously Fantasy Grounds. That's, as soon as VTT came out, I was ecstatic, because I've spent so much time traveling all over the world with military buddies and whatnot. It was great to finally have a medium in which to bridge those geographical distances, and we can continue to have those same experiences and memory building adventures just across those great distances. And I've been using Fantasy Grounds since 2006, and I got to say it's evolved a significant amount since then. Some good, some bad, but it's definitely better than it was back then. So I'm glad to see that it's pressing forward, and Doug's taking it to new places, and the rest of the user community who's provided extensions and feedback and just modules upon modules. I kind of rely on Rob's modules now to help me build my stuff in game. But short of that, outside of Fantasy Grounds, all the ancillary software that I use to get things into Fantasy Grounds, I use the standard Adobe Creative Suite of programs. So I'm using Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop for all my, well, let's actually just show you guys real quick. So it starts off with like a basic sketch on just regular graph paper, and then I bring it in here to Illustrator and I vectorize everything. You guys are, what I'm showing you guys right now is more like pre-color. But initially, it's just like straight line work. There's no variance in the weights or anything like that. It's just straight line work. And then when I bring it over into Photoshop, it looks something like that. So another program that I use a significant amount is Scrivener. And Scrivener is an absolutely amazing writing program, not just for Dungeons and Dragons, but for if you are any sort of like nonfiction, fiction writing that you're doing. Scrivener is like the word processor of all word processors. It has great organization. It has great flow. So for instance, like right here, I'm running through a synopsis of an adventure. If I need to have links that kind of like simulate a choose your own adventure style thing, I can create those links and it'll automatically take me to new story entries. Also, if I want to look at the whole of my adventure all in one go without looking at it one section at a time, I can just put it into what's called a word flow format, and it just shows me everything I've written from start to finish. You can reorganize, you can rearrange. That way you're not, it's all about organization. If you can organize your content, it makes producing the content that much easier. If you have a list of what you need made, if you know what needs to get done, and you can just work on it in small little segments, easy, and then construct it after the fact, it makes building it so much less challenging in the end. But those are the pieces of software that I use as far as creating it. Outside of that, it really just starts with a basic idea. So like for now, where I started with this new adventure coming back into Fantasy Grounds, I normally take like about a year or two break in between sessions. I'll play Fantasy Grounds for about a year or so, get super involved, and then something professional will come up and it'll force me to go away from the game for a couple of years. And then coming back to it, I was looking through the massive amount of archives I had between hard drives and network attached storage and various notebooks and whatnot. And I had about 6 or 7 really good solid ideas that I thought I could convert over into the DM's Guild. And I ended up just scratching all of those and came up with something from scratch. Never played an Everon before, never have really touched Everon, but I had this great idea. And that's where it always starts. Is like you just got to have that one little kernel of an idea, and then you just build on that. So I was like, I want a fucking airship that my players can get onto and either destroy or steal. One of those two things. That was the base idea. So from there, the next step in the process is just research. And when I mean research, it's literally like pouring through old versions of books, old 3-5 books, second edition books, all the source books that you can find, and like really diving into it. Because for me, what I want to make is something that new players will get into and just appreciate it for what it is, but also players who have been playing for long periods of time. Let's say for Everon, I think Everon came out in 2002. I want someone who's been playing Everon since 2002 to pick up my adventure and go, okay, yeah, all this makes sense. The lore makes sense. The canon makes sense. And he's built on it. He's taken this thing that I've known for the past 16 years and he's made it even better. So it's a significant amount of research. And really, it's just writing and research. I'm just coming up with a base idea, and then I compare it to the lore and the canon. If I'm off base a little bit, like originally I wasn't familiar with how Everon powered their airships. I knew there was elementals involved, but I didn't know about Soarwood. So I'm sitting here reading through the 3.5 Everon guide and the Adventurer's Handbook or the Explorer's Handbook, and I was like, oh, Soarwood, okay. So I had to go ahead and like rewrite a few things. So really, it's just research, write, and research, write, and research back and forth until I know that my story is good. Once I know my story is solid and there's no like plot holes or lore holes or canon holes in it, that's when I can start developing maps. I go straight from writing and research into developing the maps. Because it's hard for me to build encounters before I have like a location for those encounters to exist. And a big part of game design is knowing your players, knowing the audience, and anticipating as much as you can what those players may or may not do approaching your particular environment that you're designing. So writing, research, and map creation is like, it kind of all goes hand in hand because it has to match up. It has to flow and it has to match up. So as far as the map making process is concerned, really it's just...
I'm sorry, one second, Jake. Before you go to maps, we had a question. They're saying that Scrivener is only available on Mac. Is that true?
No, it's available on PC as well, except it's not, they're mutually exclusive licenses. So if you were to buy Scrivener, you either have to get Scrivener for PC or Scrivener for Mac. You can't get both. If they have changed that business model since, I am unfamiliar.
Okay.
I have it.
And then, yeah, because I looked into it previously, and my other question, this is my question that I was going to ask you when you were talking about that. Did you find that you had to, is there a learning curve for that, or do they have pretty good tutorials? You know, because you were showing how you could have the whole entire workflow, you could have just the sections, you could have links, and so is that something that you have to kind of teach yourself, or do they have a manual to go through and learn how to use that?
Oh, they have a fully interactive manual that is the interface is actually a Scrivener file. So you open up the Scrivener tutorial file, and the way that it's organized in the side pane over here actually walks you through step by step.
Oh,
Another
okay,
cool
cool.
thing
Yeah,
about, since you guys are interested in Scrivener real quick, I want to scroll all the way down here. Another good thing about Scrivener is that let's say for instance here I'm writing about portals, okay? Anything can pass through portals. Using a portal in the cargo hold is a perfectly viable option to escape. Spoiler alert. You can also store research material down here. So for instance, if you have pictures, images, PDFs, notes, anything that you are using to help in your writing process, it gives you a little folder down here specifically for research. So in here, I've put my copy of Wayfinder's Guide to Everon, which is, I had to read that thing cover to cover. I knew nothing about Everon before I started this adventure. So I read that thing cover to cover, and it gave me a lot of good ideas. It was a little deficient in the operation of airships or just general elemental powered vehicles. I had to dive into the old 3.5 books to get some of that information. But yeah, it's an absolutely amazing program. The other nice thing that I like about it is if you're into customization, you can actually like come in here and change the icons of like what is associated with that particular entry. So I know here on Aberrant Pilot, I put a little pencil icon because I have to rewrite this based on, like I said, it's reading, writing, research, reading, writing, research. I dove into a section of a book that I hadn't looked at before, and it gave me a new piece of information that completely unraveled a backstory for a pre-generated character. So I was able to keep the hook. I was able to keep the feature, but I had to rewrite the background altogether.
Gotcha. So then when you go down your list, you look for pencils and you're like, oh, I've got to go back in and change that. I see. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but no, this is, I would say the writing and the research part is probably the most important, like beginning part of it, because I know a lot of people, at least other DM friends of mine, not necessarily anybody that I know in this particular community, but prior to getting super involved in Fantasy Grounds, they wanted to jump straight into maps, which is great. But the challenge with maps is that because you have to draw them, if there's any significant changes that had to be made, you have to redraw them. So That's why I always try to like to get the story first. I want to have an idea. I want to have a synopsis of what's going to happen, how the adventure is going to start, and the multiple different endings that could take place before I start drawing maps. That way I can use that narrative to help influence the nature of the layout of the map. Because it's not just about a map for the sake of having a map. It's a map for game design. It's level design. The only difference between me and a video game designer is profit. Like, I don't make as much money as a professional video game designer, and I'm working in what essentially equates to an analog medium. I know Fantasy Grounds is technically digital, but still, like, it's analog. It's an analog medium. There's no buttons that people have to press to influence like movement or jumping or spell casting. It's really just limited by what people can say. And that's the kind of DM that I am. I've since changed to a facilitative DM. Sometimes, depending on what my players say at the table, I may not even request a roll for it. But I would always prefer, my preferred description would be, here's an example of something that I do not want. I describe a room and the players are looking around and they go, I want to make a perception check to see if I see anything. And I'm like, nope, your character doesn't know anything about perception checks. How about this instead? Your character slowly peers around the room, and then from underneath the bed, they can see a slight gleam. All right. Based on that, that should trigger the player to provide some sort of verbal description where if the player is actively role playing, even if they're not like speaking in character, I'll reward that more often than simply players talking in mechanics. I always tell my players, you're not responsible for the mechanics. I am. You're responsible for staying in character. That's all you have to do. So I personally don't enjoy it when players ask if they can make rolls. I would rather them stay in character, because if they stay in character and just use their descriptions appropriately, and if they get really creative with their descriptions, it can circumvent the need for rolls altogether.
Yeah,
and that way
I
you can
fully
focus
agree with
more on the
that, yeah.
story and less on mechanics.
I think I learned that from you, actually. Because I started, when I first started streaming, I made a clear point of shutting down players that would say, I'm going to make an Arcana check, or I'm going to make a stealth roll. Well, no, the DM tells you to do that. You don't volunteer that you're going to do that. You play the person, like you said. Your character doesn't know what a stealth roll is. So even though I'm not a heavy roleplay guy, I do stress to my players not to tell me what mechanic they want to use. I ask them to tell me, what are they going to do? What are you looking at? What are you touching? Where are you walking? That kind of thing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I would actually, I prefer, stay in character. Let the DM worry about that. Plus, the DM at that point has probably already invested way more time than you have into what's happening that evening. So another thing I always try to do is empathize with my players. The way I see it, and most of the time this is true. There's some cases where it's not, but most of the time, the people that show up to my games, they have jobs and families and wives and kids and dogs and responsibilities and jury duty and all this other shit. And they just have 2 to 3 hours of hopefully uninterrupted time where none of that ancillary stuff is creeping into the game. And they just want to escape. They just want to escape for a little bit. And I want to facilitate that. And I want to make it as easy as possible. I've already taken care of all the mechanics. Just show up and pretend that you're that rogue. That's all you got to do, man. So.
Right.
But no, sorry about that. So as far as maps are concerned, getting back to maps real quick, that always, like I said, that always follows the writing and the research part. Because it needs to have that visual representation of the crazy crap that I've come up with. And I'm a pretty intricate DM as far as what I like to put into my games. I make specific efforts to include things for every type of player that could potentially show up. The murder hobos, the AFKers that this kind of like randomly come in and out from time to time, or the guys that just, they're not as into the depth and the lore of it. They just kind of want to show up and make some rolls and do some cool shit. But also those guys that love to explore and look in every fucking nook and cranny and drawer that's available out there. I always try to reward them with putting that stuff in there. And that stuff comes in the writing. And once you get the map out that matches that writing, you can see, like, okay, from a game design standpoint, let's bring this map back up real fast. Okay, if this is the map that the characters are currently playing at, where are they going to start, and what point on the map advances the story forward? Okay, if you know where the action starts and where the next plot point is, you can start putting things in the path of in the likely paths that they would travel. So, and then rewarding them for exploring more. So if they're going outside of that destined path of like, here's the start and here's the next plot point that moves the story forward, here's all the various things that could happen between here and there, make sure that there's ancillary areas that they can explore that will reward them for that exploration. I've seen a lot of things that are just concentrated so heavily on combat and they're very linear. You can have a linear experience in your game, but you need to, especially if you're making something for public, like commercial publication or wide distribution, you have to accommodate for all those different play styles. And if that means it takes a little bit more work on your part as the DM to avoid that just straight linear presentation, then that's, at least in my mind, that responsibility does fall on me. So, and
Right.
yeah. Also, I personally love like putting furnishings in. I love putting tables and chairs and fucking rugs. I love animated rugs. If you're ever in a fucking campaign of mine, beware of any room with a rug in it. Because most players are so unprepared for that shit. Like, okay, so you walk into a room, you see a very ornate rug on the ground. There's maybe a coat of arms over here. There's an empty desk with maybe a book open on it. What do you guys want to do? And then the paladin's like, I want to go check out that book. I'm like, okay. So you take a few steps in and all of a sudden you're blind and you can't breathe anymore. Everybody else in the room, all of a sudden you see this rug just engulf Charlie over here. And then they don't know how to deal with an animated rug and they start beating they start hitting the rug and hitting the player.
Beating the player. I love it.
Exactly. And I love it. And I love that 5th edition Monster Manual put that specifically in their animated rug under animated objects, which is fucking badass. But yeah, as far as maps are concerned, I always try to make it has to have a linear element because as far as the players are concerned, the story is always going to be linear to the player. They don't see the hierarchy of the various story options and story chains that you have developed for them as a DM. From a player's perspective, they only know A to B. But for you as the DM, you have to create that illusion that there is a wide spreading choice of options for them. And you can do that not only in the content that you provide in the story, but also in the layout of the map. And I think a lot of you guys have all seen that. I know in Lost Mines of Phandelver, there's ample opportunities for characters to take a rest, take a break, collect their thoughts, take a short rest in the process of this dungeon. These non-linear areas that serve as like checkpoints or rest points, or just great opportunities to extend the lore. So like for this one, Everon is a setting that I wasn't familiar with at the start of this particular project. And now that this project's getting to the point to where it's like almost ready to be play tested, I've done tons of research on Everon. Everon's fucking badass. Everon's a badass fucking setting.
Yeah,
I can't believe
cool.
I haven't been playing Everon more. I'm kicking myself in the butt for not using Everon more. But WotC has focused so much on Western Faerun that like I needed something different. It's such a saturated environment. I needed something completely not different, but away from Faerun, because I mean, airships in Everon, that's like cliche. And that's why I needed to come up with something a little bit different. A dual powered airship. It's not just one elemental. There's 2 fucking elementals powering this thing. And this is a prototype massive airship that Everon has never seen before. All the research that I've done, I've never seen a dual powered dual hold airship in Everon before. So I want to reward players not only for their exploration, but like get them excited about Everon as well. I've gotten excited through reading about it. Now I have to find a way to translate that same excitement to the players at the table. So giving them a massive airship to explore with multiple levels that has countless amounts of lore references and lots of opportunities for them to get into the flavor of Everon. I hope that like not only facilitates their time at the table, but also gives them something to look forward to the next time they step into an Everon campaign or get excited to actively seek one out. And yeah, providing follow-up stuff for the DM as well is also very important. So like if someone were to buy this module, not only could they use the adventure, but I want them to be able to have options of like, okay, here are some suggested things that you can do after this to carry this on your own. So, but
yeah. And there's
yeah.
a lot of Everon stuff being produced now because they just started. This was 2002 that Keith Baker did this, and I guess they kept up with it in the editions, but then in 5th edition, which has been out 4 years now, they didn't do any Everon stuff, and then all of a sudden, bam, they didn't even tell anybody in advance or anything, just sprung it on everybody. So kind of cool.
There you go. Does anybody have any questions about maps or just like technical stuff about how to produce this stuff, or like best
There's been one question
workflows?
that I saved that was asked a while ago. I didn't want to break your flow, but it's more about story.
Okay.
Do you want me to ask you now?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a very generic question, and I'd like to hear. There's many answers to this, but I'd like to hear your answer. So Lazy Stooner asked, "How can you make a story with no holes? Players be crazy." And I think what he's talking
Well,
about is players will always do something that isn't what you planned. So what is
mhm.
your answer to that?
So I equate it to the 5 monkeys in a cage. In this instance, the cage is so large that they don't. Um, Let me try to find a way to phrase this. The cage is so large, there is no holes because one way or another, the ship will either get destroyed or taken over, or the players will die. So if you're creating what this one is a site-based, event-based hybrid. It's basically an event-based adventure. So instead of set events, they're set checkpoints. They're set checkpoints that take place in the adventure. And regardless what the players choose to do, kind of like Red Hand of Doom, if everyone played that adventure, the timeline is going to push forward regardless. There's always going to be these checkpoints that the players come to. The DM has to say, okay, did they do this or did they do that? It's always going to be one of those two things, regardless. And in the interim between those event points, there is static site-based elements that they can explore. And depending on what they do in between the start and event 1 or event 1 and event 2 will influence how easy or challenging those event points will be. Now, I think I know where he's going with this. In a more open world sandboxy kind of game, there is no way. You're always going to have holes. And that's where you as the DM just have to be able to adapt. That's like one of the main requirements at least in my opinion, of being an effective DM is your adaptability at the table. How well can you improv? How well do you know your lore? Really, that's, I think, the biggest thing. And that's why the writing and the research comes so in handy, is that when players start throwing random shit at you because you know your fucking shit as a DM, it's like, try me, bro. Try to throw something at me that I'm not prepared for.
Yeah, and I've talked about that before, uh, many times on stream, just off the cuff speaking about it, but also in a show we talked about it, and that is that as a DM, if you know your lore, like you said, if you know the story, if you're running your own adventure, you're probably going to know it inside and out. If you're running something that you paid for or that somebody else created, you might not know it as well as you would if that you created it. But you always keep in mind that, like Jeremy Crawford says, prepare but don't over prepare. But you do have to be ready to go. You have to have a little bit of improv skills in case the players do something you never even imagined would happen. But the thing is, you can tell them, if players go way off the rails and go far off to the side and you have nothing prepared over there, they don't know that. You can just make up shit and they're none the wiser that you didn't already know that in advance.
It's confidence behind the screen. If you say it confidently, it's going to fly. It will absolutely fly. And one thing that a mechanic that I do, and I mentioned this to Rob a couple of weeks ago, is I have this mechanic that I developed, and it's called a pull. And what that is, when I say pull, it's PULL, as in you're pulling, and then POOL, from a pool of options. You're pulling. So you're pulling from a pool. Ideally, it kind of works. Those 5e solo games that you do mods for, Rob,
Yeah.
they have a mechanic called a Q&A mechanic. It's like, oh, well, if you come across something in your solo game, just ask a question and then roll some dice. Well, this kind of takes that and it like multiplies it by 1,000. So for instance, let's say a player asks me a question that I'm not prepared for. And it's like, trying to think of one. Let's just do something simple. Is there a temple I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Is there a temple in this town? Oh shit, I'm the DM. I didn't know. I don't No. Okay. So what I'll do immediately is I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. I get 5 options up on the board. Is there a temple in this thing? What are the percentage chance that there's a temple in this particular town? Then the player would roll a D5 or a D6. On a 6, the player gets to choose. But on a 1 through 3, 4, or 5, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a 37% chance that there's a temple in this town. And 62, sorry, no temple. No, and that's how I deal with those random sporadic player gotchas or surprises. And I deal with them unbiasedly, because leaving it up to a dice roll relieves me from being a dick. It's not the DM
Right,
coming
yeah,
up with something just to
you
fuck
did.
people over. It's like, hey, man, I gave you 5 opportunities. You rolled the lowest one. Sorry, bro.
Right,
Didn't work.
and it's not. Yeah, exactly. I love that because, as you said, you're not being a dick. You're specifically leaving it to chance as to whether, a question is answered yes or no.
Another option that I do with that is, if I do know the answer, but I still don't want to be biased, I'll do a fresh pull. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'll say, okay, how likely is that to be? How likely is that to actually be? And then depending on how likely it is, I'll pick from either the highest or the lowest or somewhere in the middle of those particular D100s to choose from. And then I'll let the player roll that. So as many times as we can let the player roll, I always let the player roll. I just provide the opportunity for him. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah,
I got a couple more.
along
No worries.
the
Yeah, let's keep them going.
along that lines. There's a question. He didn't use the phrase "split the party," but I think that's what he's getting at. Diablo Bob wanted to know, what is your recommendation for handling multitasking PC madness, where 5 PCs go into 5 different areas, and do you, how do you handle that? Like, what I would do is I would I would jokingly say, don't split the party, is like a voice you hear from the heavens. But if they decide they're going to do that, I've seen different DMs just do one player at a time. Okay, everybody wait while I do Johnny, and then, okay, Johnny, we did you, now we're going to do Tina, and then, go around. But do you have a particular method that you use to circumvent the multi-fracturing of the party?
I do. First off, anytime the players are asking to do something, I always assess the benefit of what it is they're trying to do. If there's a benefit in the party splitting up, I try to facilitate that as much as possible. Again, old school D&D, like back from the 90s, early 2000s, I always found that to be very adversarial. The DM, within constraint of the rules, would try to fucking challenge the players to their limits, all right? With the new style of D&D and the way most players are comfortable now, especially with like massive attention deficit disorder and whatnot, it's easier just to kind of facilitate the players. Otherwise, you as a DM are just going to get fucking frustrated for everyone derailing you all the damn time, or not reading their shit before they're supposed to before they show up to a game. So in that particular instance, if I have a party that wants to split up, if I assess that particular line of action is beneficial to the party, I lean on the technology. Fantasy Grounds is an amazing piece of technology. You can open up multiple maps, and from the single combat tracker, you can have different players on individual maps. And that is absolutely amazing to me. As far as how you would facilitate it, like in game, well, everyone's already used to waiting anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes between turns as it is. So it used to be a problem on tabletop, because on tabletop you had a DM screen, you had note cards and little counters and tokens, and you had to start employing players to kind of help you keep track of shit. And that's why I love Fantasy Grounds so much, and that's why I put so much emphasis in that. Not only me as the DM, as a DM, if you don't know how to use Fantasy Grounds, you're doing yourself and your group a disservice. You need to know how to do every single fucking thing in Fantasy Grounds. Because if a player doesn't, to keep the game moving, you need to be able to go into that player's character sheet or go into wherever you need to go on the interface and just make it happen.
Right.
I prefer it to where if the players didn't even want to touch their character sheets, I'm fine with that. If all they wanted to do was look at them and tell me what they wanted to do, and it's faster for me to roll and click on everything, I'd rather do that. But leaning on the technology, Fantasy Grounds allows the party to be split in a more efficient way, because you can have multiple maps open simultaneously with different characters on different maps. And And if it's
Yes,
not
and I've
facilitative,
seen at least 3 other DMs besides myself do that.
there you
Take
go.
take 2 or even 3 or maybe even more maps, and just because if you're on your kitchen table, you have to basically, okay, everybody turn your head while I show Steve this, and
Exactly.
but then you can share a map with just one player, so it is an easier thing to do on Fantasy Grounds as opposed to real life. Yeah, definitely.
And if the situation is not advantageous to the players splitting up, again, I always let the players do what they want to do. It's not my job to babysit them and railroad. I always remind them, I'm not going to kill you. You will kill you. I won't kill you. And then I'll run it on separate maps, and hopefully they don't die.
Yeah.
I
Awesome.
hope that answered your question.
Okay, one more question.
Absolutely.
This is from Discord. This person wishes to remain anonymous, but
Yes,
they
sir.
ask, how can anything professional take you away from something you enjoy or love? So that goes to the beginning of your conversation here.
I know who that is. I'm just kidding. I just said that to be funny. I have no idea who it is.
So in the beginning, you kind of said, well, jobs and things like that take a priority, and I have to abandon the stuff I love.
So really what it came down to, and I guess we're going to get kind of personal here for a little bit. I went through a significant transformation not too long ago of personal principles and values. For the longest period of time, I was either helping the United States Air Force break things and kill people through my ancillary job with them. And then when I got out, I immediately went into the business of helping other people make money. I was really good at what I did. I was really good at visual communication, problem solving. And the truth of the matter is, and I guess I'm tooting my own horn. I just let my work speak for itself. I was really good. I'm a really good designer. I'm a really good creative person. And I also think that I'm a really good DM. And I can't do both equally. I just can't. It's me. It's my own personal thing. I just can't do both equally. So when professional things came up that required my attention to maintain my quality of life and my apartment and my house and my car and all that other crap, it forced this, what at the time was a hobby or just a way to hang out with my buddies. It forced it into the back seat, because the way I see it is, if I'm if I'm not gonna do it full on, I'm not gonna provide it. If I'm gonna host a game for my friends, I'm gonna give them everything I got. I'm gonna give them the maps. I'm gonna give them the story content. I'm gonna give them everything, because I want that experience to be beneficial for them. If they're coming to me to escape their lives for a couple of hours, I want to make sure I give them an adequate experience. And if I don't feel like I can provide that, I just simply don't offer it. So I hope that answers that question.
Cool.
I'm at a point now, though, where I'm tired of making other people money. I'm actually mentally disabled. I got medically retired from the Air Force back in 2008, and it's kind of been a struggle over the past 10 years. And I guess you can call it pride or whatever, but I've finally kind of given in and realized that this disability is greater than myself, and that I'm unable to overcome it just on my own. And in order to help provide an environment for myself where I can still have a creative outlet, regardless if it's work or D&D, and be happy. That's the most important thing, is to be happy and have fun. I'm not doing corporate work anymore. I'm not working for cannabis industries anymore. I'm not making people money anymore. I want to make things that make people happy and provide them with a good time. That's what I want to do. And that's why I came back into Fantasy Grounds full time again.
Preaching to the choir.
There you go.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
that, man.
Yeah, it makes me so happy. I mean, everybody who watches my show and who's been playing in my games and who's been watching my stream for 3 years or whatever, everybody knows my story, and everyone knows that I'm a huge champion of this software. But not only that, the community that it is, fostering, and everybody that's in and around it, the Fantasy Grounds forums, the YouTube presence, the FGC, just everything, Twitch community. It makes me so happy when I just hear yet again another story like what you just laid out for us, Jake, and that it's the hobby is important, whether you're young or old, and whether you're a player or DM or both. I mean, just being able to get together with people, and whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is, and just have a super amount of fun. That's like super important in my life, and I think it is to a lot of other people too. And if I talk
I
too
want to
much
answer Diablo
more
Bob's
about it,
question real
I'm gonna
quick.
tear up, so I'm gonna stop.
No worries. Hey, Diablo Bob, I had 2 AFSCs in my time. I was a 3C2 and a 3NO. So I was a network engineer for a little while, and then I was a public affairs guy. So, and I was stationed at because I know this is probably the next question. I was stationed at Luke, which is in Phoenix. I was stationed at Osan, which is in northern South Korea, and then I was stationed in Lodges Fields, Azores, Portugal, which was a fucking badass base. And then this duty station I retired from was Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas.
Oh, and that's why you used to live in Las Vegas.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it was a fun town, man. Vegas is a fun town. I met my wife there. It's so I have this thing called the Google Hand Theory, and what you do is you go onto Google Maps, regardless what screen size you have, and you go onto Google Maps and you scale it to where it's 5 miles. You keep doing your little scroll wheel until it's 5 miles, and in one more click, it'll take you to the next unit low. Nope, go back up and leave it at 5 miles. Then put your hand over whatever major American city you're assessing and draw like a small circle perimeter around the outside of your hand. That circle around that city should incorporate an even mix of urban and outdoor activities. And Vegas has a great Google Hand Theory. El Paso, Texas, not so much. But yeah. Any more questions?
I didn't see any more questions at this point.
Cool. So like I said, I come up with a base core idea. And the base core has to be fun. Again, it just has to be fun. A lot of my base core ideas is I kind of design games that I want to play. I try to design something that I think would be fun, which is why these games are oftentimes so fucking crazy, because I'm a weirdo. And then I do a bunch of research, and I write and research and write and research and write until I know there's no lore holes. Not really plot holes, just lore holes. That's really what I'm talking about, like canon. I like to stick to the canon. It makes things, I personally feel, and other people could have, I know there's other people out there that like to write their own stuff, their own continents, their own locations, their own cities, all that jazz. To me, if I was doing that, I would be spending so much time writing that I would probably never hardly get to play, not even to DM. So it's less challenging and easier for me to just adapt and expand on what most of the consumer base is already used to. That way they can still kind of feel familiar, but also explore new things that they may not have thought of, or they may not have access to through the regular commercially available products. So really when I'm trying to plug all the holes is I want to make sure that my canon and my lore and my story makes sense with what's commercially available. Even if it's slightly different, it still needs to build on that and then expand on it so that when a player interacts with it, they're like, oh, I'm familiar with this, but I never thought of it working like this. Oh, that's fucking rad. So then once I'm done as I'm writing and researching, once I get to a particular point where I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good about how this is going. I'm feeling good about the location. I've kind of sketched out what I think the site or the various sites are going to look like. I've done like rough little sketches of them or just environmentals of them. That's when I start laying down the groundwork for the maps. And that always starts on graph paper. It's because I play on a grid. I love playing on grids. I've been playing on grids my whole life. It makes it a lot easier, even for theater of the mind stuff. Sometimes it just gets to the point where a grid just helps. So drawing on a grid initially, not only is it nostalgic and just something I'm used to, it's functional in the sense that when you have to translate that over to Illustrator, you can, like, you're not seeing the grid now, but there's the grid. So I use this grid extensively. So when I'm transferring it from sketch to digital, I'm not scanning it and tracing it. I'm literally like, okay, that's 3 squares up and 2 squares over. Boom, here's a dot. And then I'm just connecting all the dots. And then once I get it in line form, that's when I go through and I turn it into walls and all that other jazz. Bring it over here into color. So
do you Chris from Game Tile Warehouse, who is a cartographer himself, he has asked, do you show others your process and the and the drawing and the illustration tools that you use, he sees all those things on your toolbar there, and he's wondering, have you done videos or show people how, step 1, step 2, all the way through on how you make your maps?
I've attempted to in the past. I think when I was doing it before, there wasn't a lot of interest. And if there was, I don't think that interest was, I don't think there was a venue. There wasn't the avenues and venues that there are now. I'm trying to take advantage of that with Twitch now. On the days that I'm working, I love to just stream my stuff. So I have the actual hardware I have an iMac 32 gig, just regular computer that I use. And then from my professional working days, I have a 22-inch Cintiq monitor. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but essentially what it is, it's a big external monitor that comes with a little stylus, a touch-sensitive stylus, and you can literally draw on your screen. It makes this process like butter. It makes it so smooth and so easy. And if you don't have if you're into cartography and you don't have some sort of stylus interface, I highly recommend it. The Cintiqs are kind of pricey, so they're maybe not for everyone. But Wacom, the company that makes the Cintiq, they make a wide variety of tablets, Bamboo and Intuos tablets that come in a variety of sizes. You don't necessarily draw on the screen. You draw on a tablet that transfers to the screen, but it's still better than trying to point and click around with a mouse. And the touch sensitivity is really the powerhouse behind this thing. So that when I'm actually like getting in there with tiny little details and stuff, it's literally as close to analog as possible, to the point even where I can change my nibs out to make it feel like, if I need that graphite on paper feel, I can change the nib out to a different nib and it'll increase that resistance on the screen for me so that it emulates that analog experience.
That's pretty cool.
I would love to teach that. The stuff I'm doing it's not complicated. It's not hard. It's really just following a process. So for instance, right here, you guys are seeing all these little color coded things and all the layers are kind of toggled up right now. But just for this crew deck alone, let's go ahead and open up all the layers involved in all the effects, just so you can see how in depth this stuff gets from time to time and what you have to actually manage. And it may look intimidating at first, but the reality is that it's no different than anything else. You just take it one step at a time. And the speed will come with familiarity. If you're not where you want to be on speed yet, don't worry about speed. Just worry about process and workflow. Get to the point to where you just know this shit inside and out and no one can challenge you on it. And you know your workflow better than anyone else. And the speed will come. But it's really, and this is just the crew deck. This is just one of the 4 decks involved, but I'm trying to toggle all of them open.
Yeah, that's like insane.
so that you guys can see them. And like I said, I absolutely love ornamentation. So the published version of this won't have these decorations, but my personal version will. It will have this type of stuff. So you can see that like we went from having no tables to all of a sudden we have tables and stools and all that other jazz.
Right.
Yeah, my personal version will have all the decorations and what. But yeah, looking at the actual layers, like this is what goes into it. It's not hard. It's just all about organization. So, and we're talking about organization real quick. Give me a second. Let me bring up something else. So, so when we look at projects, one thing I always start with is a projects template folder. So I make a blank folder that has nothing I'm never actually going to use this folder except copying and pasting. This is what my project template folders look like. I don't know if you guys can see that on the screen. I don't think there's a way for me to make it bigger. No. But the first folder is assets. The second folder is copy, and copy means all the words, all the writing that you do. The third folder is art, and that gets split up into vector and raster-based images. The fourth one is video, the fifth one is audio, and then the sixth file is all output file. So when I come in here and I need a new project, I just right-click, copy, paste it, and then rename it and move on. So right here, I'm working on Rob's bumper. I haven't had those folders in there yet. Here's the airship escape one. Here's the art. Here's copy. Here's assets, all that fun jazz. It's all about organization. That's where it really starts, regardless if you're working on, and that's regardless what creative project you're working on. you always need to be organized. You always need to know raw assets are, and you always need to know where all the various little elements are that are going to go into what essentially build your project. So yeah, organization is absolutely key. And one thing that I do that I fucking, this is my biggest pet peeve. We're allowed to cuss on your show, right?
Absolutely, fucking A.
The biggest fucking pet peeve of mine is when I get a raw source file. A raw source file is a PSD, an AI, or an INDD. Photoshop deals with Photoshop documents or PSDs or TIFFs. Illustrator deals with AI or EPS files. And InDesign, well, InDesign's kind of proprietary. It only deals with InDesign documents. When I get a source file from another creative and they don't fucking name their layers, that drives me bonkers. Because here, there's a lot of shit that goes on here. If I was collaborating with another artist and had to send this map to him and none of these layers were named, it just said layer 1 and then layer 1 copy 1, layer 1 copy 2, layer 2, layer 2 copy 2. It's like,
yeah, it'd be insane.
You have to go around and point and click and find out what everything fucking is. But everything in my layers is labeled and named. Oh, here's the crew deck walls. Here's what I need. So if I want to turn off the walls, I just click that and all the color for the walls go away. If I want to change what the overlay or if I want to change any of the effects, I can just click in here, manually change them up, and it'll change what that looks like live on the thing. But I wouldn't know that if it wasn't labeled properly.
Right.
I cannot stress that enough. If you're dealing with a program that involves layers, label that shit. Or even here in Illustrator, siege deck, and then bam, I know where my siege deck is. I know where my crew deck is. I know where all this stuff is. You have to label your layers in your creative programs. And I think GIMP, for those of you who are using GIMP, I would recommend doing the same. And real quick, just a shameless push for Adobe, because I used to be an instructor for them. If all you want to do is get Photoshop, you can get Photoshop for $10 a month. Yeah. Photoshop costs $10 a month. You don't need to get the full $70 Creative Suite. I have the full $70 Creative Suite, but that's because of all the crazy shit that I do. If all you want to do is get access to Photoshop so you can do stuff like this, I will show. If there's people interested, hit me up. Write me, email me, call me. I'll give you my damn personal number if you want. I love to teach this stuff. I used to be an instructor at UNLV. I used to be an Adobe certified instructor for their user groups. I've taught graphic design, photography, video. I know how to do all this shit, and I will gladly teach people this stuff absolutely for free. I'll teach it for free because I think it's a skill that if someone is willing to invest that amount of time and bring me their enthusiasm and their willingness and dedication to learn and bring the same passion to it that I have, I'll teach you for free. But if you show up and you're like, I'm kind of interested in this, I'm like, here's a list of online resources you can go check out.
Yeah, well, you might have just bought yourself some students because I'm one of them. I'm self-taught in Photoshop. I did take one class, but it was like it was like a continuing. Oh, that's cool looking. A continuing education, like, come in here and we show you kind of how to use Photoshop, but it wasn't in depth, and so I can fumble around in it, and other things that I've done myself in Photoshop have all just been what I've learned. And if I didn't know how to do something, I'd go to adobe.com and find the video and watch it and learn how to do it. But yeah, I'd love to become a master at this. I'm trying to teach myself campaign cartographer as well, and it's just the time, it slips down the list of priorities just because I have so much that I'm doing.
I don't like using. I love campaign cartographer. I love digital dungeon design. I think those tools and assets they have unlimited value. I absolutely am a huge proponent of other individuals using that stuff because Photoshop is a monster. It's actually not that complicated. If you can get behind the idea of what masking is, Photoshop becomes very easy to use in a wide variety of ways. But for individuals who just like, I don't have time, I have this cool fucking adventure, I just want to get this map done and knock it out. Boom, campaign cartographer is awesome. I used to use that back in the day, not because I didn't want to use Photoshop, but because at that particular time, for the limited amount of time that I had to invest in producing content for players, campaign cartographer was just easier to use. really that's what it comes down to. It's not what's better or worse or what have you. The best way to use Photoshop or the best way to use any program is the way that is most comfortable for you. There is no right or wrong way to do something. It's just whatever's more comfortable for you. So if there's people out there that are used to Campaign Cartographer, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you get to a point like I did, where at least at the time, I know since then they've included a lot more assets to use. But at the time, it was pretty limited back in the day. It was when it wasn't even CC3 back then when I was using it. I think they were on their second version, not even CC3 plus. But it just didn't have the assets that I wanted. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to change up my workflow and start incorporating Photoshop into it so I can produce custom stuff. Because I don't know, you guys tell me, can you is a map like this replicable in Campaign Cartographer? Can you do something that
I would say
like
my
this?
answer to that is I have no idea. It seems like you should be able to do that. They even have Shipmaker or but it's more sci-fi or whatever, but it seems like you should be able to do it. But I in my experience, Photoshop is more intricate and more specific, and Campaign Cartographer sort of allows you to build using elements and not have to worry about. I mean, it's more CAD-ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they each have. But my thing is I just want to learn it all. I want to learn everything.
So
Actually,
I wanted to show you guys something real
okay.
quick.
There was a
You said it
question.
was. Oh, what's up?
Yeah. I just here it is. Diablo Bob was asking, do you use sound effects or background music when you run games, and how do you choose the right ambience or sound effects for your games and on the fly? And he's asking because some sounds fit maps perfectly and some are just wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Before I answer that question, I'm going to music audio choices. I'm going to write that question down. I just want to show you something that might interest you. If you're used to that CAD functionality that Campaign Cartographer has, with libraries in Photoshop, do you see this, Rob?
Mm-hmm.
So if I need, let's say, a tree or a bush or something, I can literally just drag it in. Oh, it's saying it's on a smart object layer. There we go. So I can just literally, just right from my library, drag that in, just like so. And then immediately I have this asset available. All you have to do is take the time to build your own libraries of assets, and you can simulate or provide yourself with that same level of just drag and drop functionality if you want.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's very powerful. I did
So,
not even know that. I mean, I heard about libraries, and then I was like, I don't know what that is. And then my thing is that when I'm usually looking for the quick fix on what I need done, and I stop before I get to the step of educating myself fully on something that I'm gonna have to learn for 2 hours.
There you go.
And
And as
so
long
if
as you're
I
not
have to take
using
the
the stuff
time,
commercially, you can. I know I keep saying this in the forums and whatnot, but unlike I'm not bashing Fantasy Grounds. I'm just highlighting a feature of a competitor that makes it user friendly on the back end. If you go to Roll20 and you go browse their art asset collections, and this only works if you're using it personally. I am not advocating this for commercial use. If you're using it personally, you can, and you buy something on the Roll20 art assets site. They're not encrypted. You can download the transparent PNGs directly to your machine and use them in a program like GIMP or Photoshop, or build libraries with them like this. These are assets that I've purchased from a guy named Gabriel Picard, because him and I have a very similar style. So I was like, okay, somebody already did all the decorations I like. I'm just going to fucking use these guys for my personal games. Can't use them commercially. So I recreate the things that I need, but you can use the Roll20 assets inside of Fantasy Grounds because they're a little bit more user-friendly to access, and they're a little bit more user-friendly to utilize after the fact. Unlike Fantasy Grounds assets, like the maps and the tokens, like you're kind of stuck, and you have to keep them as is. Yeah, which I don't personally enjoy. I think it's a disservice, not only to from a DM. Okay, customization. If a DM, I haven't met a DM out there who doesn't like to customize his own shit. If you remove my option of customization, you are no longer a viable asset for me to utilize.
yeah, I think
If
they're
you're going to
moving
sell me
toward
something that I can customize, I'll buy it all the live long fucking day.
With FG Unity, there'll be customization, and the reason that it's not that way now is just because I don't think they're making, they don't want to take time to make something like that when the next thing's coming very soon anyway, so they don't want to quote unquote waste their time on that. They probably would have been better to do it originally, but they didn't, so then it is what it is. But I didn't know that. I didn't know you could buy Roll20 assets and then just keep them on your hard drive. I didn't know that you could do that.
Well, Meditating Monkey is pointing something out. He says it's an option for Roll20 artists to be able to make their assets available for download. Not every set does, but about 99%. So I guess I'm fortunate. The artists that I've kind of gravitated towards are generous in that way. And I'm the same way. If any I have no modules for sale on Fantasy Grounds yet. The map you're looking at now is the first commercial map that I've ever made. This is the first commercial adventure that I've ever written. And what I'm finding the biggest challenge, and don't worry, Diablo Bob, we're still getting to your question about music and audio choices. The biggest challenge that I've found is I've gotten so used to the style and of the games that I run for my player groups, and translating that into commercial production is it's about, I would say, 3 to 4 times as much work, because for a player group, I'm creating the map. They get the good quality map. They get the good quality story. They get all that fun jazz, but there's no PDF for them to download. All that stuff exists either in my head on note paper or in Scrivener that I just reference while I'm playing. So to jump into this commercial realm, what I'm finding is that I have to get every single thing in my head down onto the page. That way, if I'm hoping that the DM who buys this or the group that runs this adventure when I'm not around, they need to know what I was thinking. What I'm thinking needs to get conveyed in through the copy. It needs to get conveyed in through the writing, the layout, the design, the way the maps are presented, all that jazz. Otherwise, what you get is, and unfortunately WotC's kind of subject to this, is what you get an adventure that isn't really presented in a clean way. And I look at Princess of Apocalypse as a huge glaring example of that. Like, Princess of Apocalypse made a market for people explaining how to run the adventure. There shouldn't be a secondary book to explain how to read the book. Right. And that's what I see as a huge deficit in the market right now. I think there's a lot of good stuff on the DMs Guild. I think there's a lot of good stuff from WotC. I see a lot of design and presentation holes, and that's just not from me as a DM. Me as a creative professional is saying that. And that is what I think is the unique thing that I'm bringing to the marketplace, is that when you buy an adventure from me, not only are you going to have the options to customize it however you want, but if you read it, it will be explained to you in an easy to follow, understand way, where you won't have to read the book 2 or 3 times or constantly annotate in the book on your own. Like, okay, well, they reference this and that's on page this, so write that down. And then you go to this page and that references another page, so you write that down. You have to manually look through it yourself. I don't want that. I want individuals to open my book and all the page number. If they need to flip back and forth between pages, they'll know. They'll know what pages to go to. It'll be organized in a much more effective, easy to follow way from the DM, so that they're spending less time on prep and more time playing the fucking game.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Diablo Bob, as far as my music choices and audio choices, to be honest, I've been using Sirenscape for quite some time. I don't like their interface, but I do like the quality of the audio that they have. And for personal games, what I do is I'll use this program called Audio Hijack, and I'll open up Sirenscape, play the sounds that I want, record them into Audio Hijack, and then I use this program called Farrago, which essentially it's just a soundboard. I can assign various MP3s and WAV files. So if I wanted to play, let's say, this funky loop, I just play it and it'll play. And I can loop it, I can solo it, I can change the volume of it, and that's how I integrate audio into the game. And as far as my selection choices for personal stuff, I choose from the wide variety of options that Ben gave us in Sirenscape, or for this commercially available product, the music and audio is something I just don't do. I am a musician, but I don't know how to make fantasy music. Fortunately for me, I'm friends with an amazing professional composer who loves working on projects with me for a small cut of whatever profits I make. So I collaborate with him. His name is Josh Aldrich. If you're interested, I'll definitely get some contact information for you guys. Super talented individual. He's composed stuff all over the world. I think he was in Germany last year doing some stuff. And it's a really fun asset to have in your back pocket to call up a personal friend of yours who can compose some stuff. Or I can do my own voiceovers and send them. And I'm like, okay, so this needs to sound kind of like demonic. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to fucking kill you. And he can take that audio clip and then turn it into something. I can track like this if I need to do something like that. And he can turn it around. He can turn that around and make it sound however I'm describing. He follows along with the script. He looks at all the audio cues. And then I kind of just trust him because he's that fucking good. So, but yeah, that's essentially, as far as the actual choices, like if I'm providing him direction, I know where the tense, it's just like watching a movie. If you want to get more familiar with how to use audio as a narrative element in your games, just watch your favorite movies and seriously just try to listen to the audio. Pay attention to what's happening in the specific plot points of the narrative on screen and just really try to pay attention to the audio. Ideally, the way these movie makers and content producers are hoping that you experience it is that it should all, to the viewer, feel kind of transparent, like the whole experience just kind of encapsulates you. But if you're getting into the business of content production and creating things and starting to mix multiple mediums into like a single output source, you have to be able to look at examples that inspire you and know how to dissect those things. You have to be able to, like, for instance, listening to soundtracks is a great way because, like, if you watch I watch Lord of the Rings maybe about 2-3 times a month. I'm one of those guys that listens to the same songs over and over. Me and my wife constantly binge watch The Office and Parks and Rec. We don't really consume new content personally because I think the new content kind of sucks. But going back and just rewatching a bunch of old content, I've watched Lord of the Rings so much that when I listen to just the soundtrack, I can just watch the movie in my head listening to the soundtrack because that soundtrack, it's meant to be there for a reason. They don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in producing movie scores for no reason. It has to fit something. It's just as important as the actor and the costumes and the set design. The music is just as important. So understanding your narrative as a DM, understanding your story as a DM, and knowing where those tense moments are or those moments of action are, you either A, find stuff that matches that, or B, you collaborate with people who can produce it and try as much as you can to convey the narrative and the feeling. Like, what are you trying to evoke? What should people be feeling at this point in time? If you're going to play that music, what emotions should it incite in the person? Should it make them feel excited and tense, or should it make them kind of feel like scared? I remember I was doing this one adventure where they were in a mine fighting a dragon, and I had a dragon sound queued up, and we had the right tense music, action music in the background, and the feedback I got from my players was like, that was fucking badass. And to me, I took that as, thank you for distracting us for 3.5 hours. This was well worth our time. Can't wait to come back and do it again. So I hope that answers your question. Follow the narrative and try to find appropriate scores and soundtracks that help convey that same feeling that you're trying to express in just the regular gameplay.
Yeah.
Is it prize time?
It might be. Have you gone through your whole entire workflow, Jake?
No, I still wanted to, I was going to talk about pre-gen, writing encounters, playtesting, editing mechanics, editing story, audio production, layout and design, fantasy ground conversion, and final proofing.
Oh, so we're in no way done already.
But we don't
Okay.
have to. We don't have to though.
No, I want to get to all that. I guess, but I tend to want to, like, if people have questions, I want to get them answered, but all that does is slow the show down. Now, we don't have a time limit. We can go 14 fucking more hours. I don't give a shit. But let's move on to.
It's your show, Rob. I'm a guest. It's your show.
But I want to get all the information that you had, before we started the show, everybody, Jake laid out, he went through the bullet point list of like the 20 things he wanted to talk about. And as he was reading it off in my head, I'm like, yes, everybody needs to know each one of these, every single one of these. But we, so we need to get to them. So yeah, please continue.
Oh, okay, cool. Just so that you guys know, if you have not been aware, at the end of the stream, what I'm willing to offer as a prize is a free, totally pro bono, 20 by 20 square, 50. It's basically 1,000 by 1,000 pixel map. I will coordinate with the winner. We will talk about your concept. If you have a sketch or something like that, you can give it to me and I will produce a map for you. The only caveat is that it will not have any, it'll kind of look like this in the sense that it'll be undecorated. There'll be no tables, chairs, and whatnot, but you'll have walls and doors and basic features of the map. So that's what we're going to be giving away at the end of the stream.
Right,
Whenever
so
Rob
hang out till the
decides
end,
that's
because
most appropriate.
when he's done, right before the end of the show, we'll do a raffle for that, and everybody can enter the way we always do the raffles, and we'll draw one winner, and then that winner will be able to describe to Jake what they want for their map, and he'll make it. So there you go.
Did we do Lost Mines already?
Dude, where were you? We gave
I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. Stooner was the only one that entered.
I do want to say I absolutely love Lost Mines of Phandelver,
Lost
by
Mines
the way.
is,
Out of
is
all
the
the
best,
intro
yeah.
adventures I've ever seen for the various editions of D&D, Lost Mines is the absolute best one. It's by far and away the best one.
I feel like I'm so left out because I've never gotten to play that.
What?
I've seen it.
Fury, I would love to DM that for you.
One time.
I would love to DM Lost Mines for you.
Done. I'll be there.
If you're interested in me DMing a Lost Mines game for you, Fury in Phandelver, go ahead and hit pound 69 in the stream chat, and we'll go to your name.
Oh my God. I'll take names. I'll take the names.
And we might be able to get a group. I would love to. I'll run that. I'll run that all day, every day. That's a fun adventure to run. So where we left off, I think we've hit maps over the head quite a lot. Are we kind of good with maps?
Well, and we don't need to continue any further on maps, because if people want to take a class, you'll teach it to them. So there you go.
There you go. So another thing I wanted to talk about is pre-gens. Anytime I'm writing an adventure, because I want, again, the goal is less prep, more play. Okay, that's all. That's one of the main mantras. It's always got to be fun, less prep for the DM, more playtime with him and his friends. So pre-gens, any adventure that you write, I always recommend including some pre-generated characters, and not only just pre-gens, but pre-gens that complement the adventure. So, for instance, in this case, I'm going to read these pre-gens off for you guys. I'm not going to tell you the backstories or anything because I want you guys to get surprised. But if you were to buy this Flight of the Catalyst adventure from me, that'll be available in about a month or so, you can choose from one of the 5 pre-generated characters. There's a gnome artificer with a charlatan background and an arcane engineering hook. There's a half-elf dragon-marked sorcerer with a noble background and a rebel of the storms hook. There's a human variant rogue with an urchin background and an aberrant pilot hook. There's a half-elf cleric sailor with a boatswain at large hook. And then there's a warforged juggernaut barbarian soldier with an oiled machine hook. And the idea behind this is I'm trying to introduce Everon to everyone who potentially buys this thing. And I want there to be a variety of options to choose from at the table. So you have a full-on dragon-marked character. You have an aberrant dragon-marked character. You have one of the new races, or not, it's not new, but everyone's familiar with Warforged. But you have a race specific just to that setting. I was going to go Warforged and Changeling, but that was too much. I was looking over it and playtesting a few things. It was just way too much. And you have an old class from 3rd edition Everon, the Artificer. And that's actually built off the Unearthed Arcana build that they did last year. So that way, the idea behind these pre-gens is I'm introducing a little bit of flavor spread across the characters so that everyone kind of gets a touch on something that's new to the setting if they've never played it, or something that's familiar to the setting if they're very used to it. Also, given the hooks that they have, let's see if I can read one hook that might get you guys kind of excited. Let's see here. We'll do oil machine. So this is for the Warforged. This is the hook. For reasons only your mind is aware, you've entered into a contract to serve as a technological asset for a group of humanoids intent on boarding a Landarian airship and acquiring the dragon shards used as its power source. Upon completing the contract, you will receive compensation equivalent to the cost of a moderate mechanical upgrade or augmentation. So finding ways to just introduce flavor at all points in times, and that goes into the pre-gens. Pre-gens need to complement the adventure. They need to not necessarily introduce, but like offer things that are unique to your specific setting and the series of events that's going to take place between the start and the end. And also, when you're building these guys, so for instance, I'll give you a quick little sample. I combined wing boots and glamour weave, okay, to make this super cool fucking magic item from one of these characters. Every character comes equipped with at least one magic item, since the adventure starts at 3rd level, and it in some way, shape, or form accentuates the action that they may or may not encounter on the ship. So going back to what Diablo Bob was talking about as far as like, well, how are you going to fill in all the plot holes? Well, if you know your adventure forward and backward, you can take these pre-generated characters as an opportunity to further accentuate what it is you're trying to do with your adventure. So if characters have complementary items or complementary skills, it kind of makes each character rely on the other one. That in and of itself helps to ensure that the game moves forward as you intended it as the DM. Because if there's always the option, in the book, it'll say like, okay, you can run it with these pre-generated characters. I highly recommend that your first time through. But if you say, fuck these pre-generated characters, my players want to make their own characters, it'll come with suggestions on how to help emulate that. And if you want to forego those as well and just let the players make whatever characters they want, then that's the freedom to do it too. And that's where the playtesting comes in, is to make sure that it's not too easy for the pre-generated characters to do it, and it's not entirely impossible for like random player-generated characters to do it as well. So that's the thought process behind pre-gens at least from my perspective in an adventure. So, cool. Any questions there?
I don't think
Move
so.
on. Okay, cool. So writing encounters. This is where, and there's things that I'm really good at, and there's things that I'm not so good at. Encounters, I would say encounters are probably the most challenging because of the 2 variables that everyone knows about. Player fucking insanity, that the things that players decide they want to do, and the dice. So with that in mind, whenever I'm writing encounters, instead of just sticking to one static difficulty, I always run a range, and I always like to give myself options. So in this instance, I want to be able, in a published adventure, I want to be able to give the DM options as well. So I always categorize it into the easy, medium, and hard. I try to run everything at medium. And then if it's too hard, I give segues to go into easy. And if it's too easy, I give segues to go into hard. It's like if 2 of these monsters have died in the 2nd round, well, then here's how you can increase the difficulty without killing everybody. And if it's like, okay, well, it's the 5th round and only 1 fucking monster has died, here's how we can go into an easier encounter. And it doesn't feel like you're coddling or turning up the heat on the players. It feels natural to them. So, and really that just comes out in playtesting. A lot of that playtesting, it's really easy to do in Fantasy Grounds, and I've seen Rob do it with Fashomo when he does those monster battles. Just open up your map, throw your fucking characters in there. That's the other cool benefit of pre-gens, is that you'll have characters that are appropriate for that adventure, and you don't need to make up new ones. You throw in your pre-gens, you throw in some of the monsters that you think, and you just run it like 3 or 4 times and see like, okay, well, if the initiative order changes like this, okay, if the initiative order isn't in the player's favor, this is probably going to be a little too hard. If the players do get the jump on the monsters, or if they do get a surprise round or whatever, it turns into this fucking cakewalk. If it ever turns into a cakewalk due to a circumstance that benefits the players, I let that run. Because if the players are smart enough or lucky enough to get into an advantageous situation where they do have surprise, you need to reward the players for that. You need to reward them. That's where that whole difference between an adversarial and a facilitative DM comes into play. Right. Old school Jake would have said, yeah, fuck them. They fucked up on the roll. They didn't get their initiatives right. Guess what, motherfuckers? You're going to die. No. People don't. That's the thing. Back in the day, at least the players I played with, have ample amounts of time to fucking full on develop backstories and portraits for their characters. And everyone knows the rule. As soon as you draw a portrait for a level 1 character, that motherfucker. You don't draw a portrait for your character at least until they get to level like 7 or 10, up at least to level 7, in my opinion. But making it to where rewarding players for surprise rounds and quick thinking, ways to circumvent the adventure, I always let that stuff slide, and always give your players an out in the encounter. Not necessarily an out to where like they're guaranteed to live without consequence, but give them an out so that they're not like getting fucked over just because the RNG isn't going in their favor that night. You know what I mean?
Right.
Does that make sense, Rob?
Yeah, I think a lot of DMs are predisposed to TPKing the party. Not that that isn't a valid part of the game, but you might not, as a DM, you might not want to do that. It depends, it depends on the scenario. It's a case by case, and it depends on your game, and is it a one shot, and is it a campaign, and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, those are all valid points that you were making, and if you can give the players an out, again, like you say, maybe not without penalty, but a way to continue the game, as opposed to, okay, it's over now, everyone's dead, or we have to make new characters or whatever. And there might be reasons you want to do that, but yeah, I agree with what you said.
I enjoy the dungeon world mechanic. One thing that I've been doing lately, significant amount of different gaming systems, something that I didn't used to do in the past. It was just I was D&D and that was it. I've been reading a lot of the new Pathfinder stuff. I've been reading a lot of the old Pathfinder stuff. I've been reading a lot of the basic role-playing stuff from Chaosium. I've been reading a lot of Adam Cobell's Dungeon World stuff. And I got to say, Adam Cobell's Dungeon World mechanic of risk versus reward that should be in D&D canon. That should be in the books. Essentially what it says is the story is always going to move forward. The players will, somehow or another, the story will move forward. But depending on player action and dice rolls, determines the amount of, or the severity of the consequence. Meaning you're going to succeed, you're going to make it, but you may lose hit dice, or you may lose equipment, or you may lose access to things that would normally otherwise provide you a boon. That way you're not getting into these instances where either A, just because of weird player actions, or B, like, the random number generator rolls from D20s, it's not stopping the action. The whole idea is just to constantly move the action forward. Even at consequence, always move the action forward. And that's not me, that's Adam Cobell. So I got to give him credit on that one. But it's a great adage to put into your games as a DM, because really what it does is it allows the players the freedom to do what they want and feel like they're in control of their characters and that their actions actually influence the environment. And at the same time, it gives you an opportunity as a DM to like not have to scrap certain things or put things on hold. You can still run the encounter the way you want. You can still have those particular little flavor points or those story points that you wanted to incorporate. Because there's been times in the past, man, when I'm running a game and, the players just, because I let them do what they want to do, they kind of derail themselves. I don't derail them, they derail themselves. And I have to like wrangle them back in. And a couple years ago, ever since I started incorporating this dungeon world mechanic into my D&D games, it's confined that a little bit. The players don't know that the bumpers are up on the gutter. They can't get into the gutter. There is no gutter for them to get into. And that dungeon world mechanic simply acts as gutters on the bowling lane, so to speak, if that analogy makes sense. Or yeah, bumpers on the gutters, yeah.
Bumpers on the gutters, I know what you mean.
Bumpers on the gutters.
It's a bowling reference. I get it.
So as far as the playtesting is concerned, once I feel like I've sorted it out on my own, I can't accommodate for everything that everyone's going to fucking do. So I get together with some other people that are competent and kind of know what they're doing with the game, and I let them run through it a few times. And the way I do playtesting with groups is it's not, hey, let's play this whole adventure. It's, here's a scenario. If I feel like the playtesting that I've done is sufficient, I leave that particular part of the adventure alone. If there's a part of the adventure where I'm like, man, I keep running this and I keep getting varied results, I need to see what an actual group of players does in this particular scenario, I will break out just that one scenario, present it to the players, give them as much backstory as they need so that they can make relevant and accurate decisions, informed decisions on what they're doing. So it's not just arbitrary. And I let them run just through that encounter or just that particular scenario or that puzzle or that challenge or that area. And I let them run through it multiple times. I make them switch up the players and I say, okay, we're going to run it again. Try not to do what you did. Don't do the same thing you did last time. Try to accomplish this task differently. And that way you can get variance in the results that you have. And so long as I'm getting something of like a medium average of what's acceptable, meaning I'd like to go for 60%. If they can complete the encounter 60% of the time, regardless if it was rolls in their favor, rolls not in their favor, or decisions made, I consider that part of the encounter zipped up. If they can't do it, if they can only do it like half the time or fewer, they have to be able to do it more than half of the time. Otherwise, I need to go back and rewrite the encounter, because if half of the time they're not getting through it, that is a potential wall that will come up for a DM. And that takes away from just playing and having fun, because then it forces the DM into something that they didn't write this adventure. They don't know what the possible fucking solutions are. And I don't want them to have to worry about it. I want them to focus on playing the game and facilitating this fun for their players, not problem solving shit that I half-assed.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
So once the mechanics are good, I start editing the story part. And when I say editing the story, I mean like traditional copy editing, capitalization, punctuation, flow of words, that sort of thing. Like it has to read well, because oftentimes a lot of this stuff comes off really fucking mechanical. It takes a really good story editor or a copy editor to go through and make that read well. And with my background in journalism, that helps me out with that. Also, it doesn't hurt to have people that you trust that aren't going to steal your ideas or potentially send out spoilers to read through your stuff as well, to make sure that it makes sense to people who aren't so close to the project. Because a lot of times what happens, and I do not suffer from this. I have never suffered from this. I swear to God. I don't take ownership over my creations, because the idea is to create it and then distribute it. Therefore, you essentially remove ownership from that. So what that means is that somebody reading it, you have to be able to allow someone else to read it and provide you that feedback so that it makes sense to them. Because if my goal, I'm always considering my target audience. If my goal is to have a new DM who's never played Everon before pick this up, feel comfortable with it, and be able to run it with his friends, there should be no question in his mind what the fuck's going on in my adventure.
Right.
There's like ambiguity or confusion relating around the topics or the explanation of particular lore or canon points, or even like how fucking certain mechanics in the game work, and they know the rules, they just don't know like the specifics that I'm trying to use, then that is a problem. That is a challenge that needs to be corrected, and it needs to get rewritten so that it's effective in the game, but it's also easy to understand no matter who picks it up. Anybody who picks it up needs to be able to fucking understand it. We talked about audio production a little bit earlier with Diablo Bob's question, but really the audio production part comes in once the story has been edited and I know that there's no changes. Then I go back through all those little notes, and that's when I put in like the way it'll actually read in the PDF. When you get to that part, there'll be a little music icon or a little speaker icon that says play this track with this part. And the way the tracks come, there's a voiceover track for any sort of read aloud text, and there's a soundtrack. The voiceover track will come with just the voiceover, audio only or vocal only, and then vocal and background music, because I know some DMs like to run their own background music. So I'm considering the DM that's like, I want my own background music, but I like your voiceover. They need to have a clean voiceover. Or I like your background music, but I want to read it myself. I like the way I do my voice. So, okay, here's just the music. Or I just want your voiceover and the music, boom. So there'll be 3 different versions in each particular opportunity for that set or for that environment or that particular instance.
Right.
Then we do layout and design. That's when we bring I know there's some websites there that kind of emulate like the WotC format and the font use and the color and the typography and how everything looks.
I use the critical, what's it called? The homebrewery.critical, whatever the hell it is. I use that.
Great resource. Great resource for people that don't know how to use InDesign. But if you know how to use InDesign, if you know how to use a professional design and layout program, I highly recommend using that, because it's a little bit more it's a lot easier actually to make it look exactly how you want. I know that the homebrew thing that Rob's talking about, the website that I've seen, and maybe Rob can post a link to it so you guys can check it out yourselves. It's a fantastic resource if you're just trying to keep things basic. But if you want that full throttle control to be able to just control every single detail of how it looks in the PDF, InDesign is definitely the way to go. Out of all the Adobe programs, I would say InDesign and After Effects are probably the two most complicated, because they're the two that are, from a conceptual standpoint, you don't necessarily make anything in InDesign. If we were comparing this to a construction site, InDesign is the construction site. All right. Photoshop is just a brick factory, and Illustrator is the wood factory. And InDesign is where you bring the bricks and the wood and you put everything fucking together. Okay. So in InDesign, I'm already taking the copy that I've written from Scrivener and I'm putting it into InDesign. I'm taking the images that I've made in Photoshop and I'm putting them into InDesign. And with that, I'm controlling all the nuances of how it visually looks. I have the fonts that WotC uses aren't proprietary. Anybody can go out and purchase the fonts. You just have to know what those fonts are. And if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to. I can't share the fonts with you because that's illegal, but I can let you know what the fonts are if you haven't been able to.
Yeah, there's. I found those one time. Yeah, there you. I think if you just search in Google Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons and Dragons fonts, it'll tell you the name, and then you can go buy those fonts. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not hard.
Yeah, and that's where InDesign comes in. And if you don't like WotC's format, if you don't like the way it looks, there's nothing in the DM's Guild that says you have to make it look like a WotC product. That's another
the format,
place where
exactly. I just do that. I like the home brewery version because it somewhat emulates the WotC format, but it's also it's like a plug and play, and I don't have to fuck around because I do not know how to use InDesign, even though I have it. I have the Adobe suite, but all I ever use is Photoshop and Acrobat. And but I got it at the student rate anyway, so because I'm all hooked up with an EDU email, so there you go.
There you go. So once it's designed and laid out, that PDF is ready to go. That thing it's ready to get released out into the world. But then what you got to do is you got to bring that stuff into Fantasy Grounds. So it's pointless to do any sort of conversion when you're still going through the copy editing process and the writing mechanics and all that, because you don't want to have to change it in multiple places. I only do my Fantasy Grounds conversions, even for when I'm back in the day when I was doing just homebrew stuff or just home games for people. I didn't do anything in Fantasy Grounds until I knew it was solid outside of Fantasy Grounds, because Fantasy Grounds, I don't have parse. I had the old version of the regular user version of parse, but that was kind of incomplete and kind of hard to use. There was some missing syntaxes that didn't translate 100%. And I believe Doug and company since then have really stepped up the export features just within Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah, so parse can be used
Rob can speak to that.
Yeah, parse can be used to make everything that you would expect to see in a Fantasy Grounds module all the way professionally done, like the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Masters Guild. But almost everything can be done within Fantasy Grounds, and then you can just export it. The only thing you can't do inside Fantasy Grounds is you can't do like the equipment tables or the NPC by CR level or alphabetically, like when you open up a module in your library and then you click on NPCs, it says, here's the NPCs alphabetically, here they are by CR level, here they are by type. So that sort of categorization with the NPCs and the equipment can't be done, but literally everything else can be done now, including reference manual, because Celestian wrote the author extension, which if you just install the author extension and then break up your story entries into chapters, you can export that and it'll do a reference manual for you, including inline images and everything that you need. I mean, it's awesome. And so, and this wasn't always the case, right? They've been adding and adding. The most recent thing that they added.
I got in a fight with Doug about that one time.
Well, the most recent thing they added was now you can export pre-gen characters, which you couldn't do even up to a couple months ago.
Yep. And every time I have left Fantasy Grounds and then come back to it, company have been slowly assembling a much more robust and versatile piece of software. Because it's gotten to the point now, man. Fantasy Grounds is. I played on Roll20 for a while because you just got to check out all the tool sets. You got to see what's out there. And don't get me wrong, I like the dynamic lighting of Roll20, but from a DM standpoint, the organization part of Fantasy Grounds and being able to segment out your stories, create hyperlinks, the formatting of the text, the read aloud text, the assigning of the speaker to the read aloud text, and to be able to export all that out, that's amazing. Doug's done Doug and all amazing. And I know Rob's converted. How many things have you converted for Fantasy Grounds officially?
I'm working on my 37th title.
There you go.
There's 34 in the store, 2 in approval, and then 1 I'm working on now.
Yeah. It's just an amazing program. And I always save that conversion for the absolute end because it is amazing and it's a little bit finicky. And as long as you're patient and willing to massage it a little bit and treat it nice, maybe take it out to dinner, buy it some flowers, Fantasy Grounds will eventually cooperate with you.
Yeah,
and you can get out of it what you put into it. And then once we get it converted and everything's done, I do a final proof. I go through everything and I'm just checking my lowercase j's to make sure those are dotted, checking my t's they're crossed and all that jazz. And because you're so into it, you're so involved in the project. There's so many at that point. By the time you get to this phase in the process, so many eyes have been on it. So many things have potentially changed. You really just want to kind of take a couple of days off from it, come back to it, look at it with fresh eyes, and just give it that one final go through. So,
yeah.
And then play the fuck out of that thing and hope people like it.
That's it. That's how you do it.
There you go. So I hope that was informative for everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I wasn't too long-winded.
I have to believe, unless people were simply not listening, I have to believe that everybody got quite a bit out of that.
Cool.
So that was awesome. And I showed people the link to that homebrewer thing. So if you don't know how to use InDesign, you can do that. So great. Thank you, Jake, for all that information. And now we must give away your special prize that we talked about.
I'm very excited about this.
So again, for those of you that might have shown up late, Jake is going to be giving away a prize. I'm going to start a raffle right now, and then we will explain what this prize is. So let's see. I know what the keyword should be.
How long are you going to run this for, Rob?
Run what for?
How long are you going to run the raffle for? Because I think normally you're doing for like.
Yeah, you do them for 3 or 4 minutes. I'll do this one for 5.
Oh, okay, cool.
Unless you want to change that.
No. But I do have a riddle for everyone, just for fun. It has nothing. There's no prize associated with this riddle. Okay. Just your own personal satisfaction.
So before you do the riddle, we'll start the raffle for the map. And again, this is a 20 by 20, 1,000 pixel by 1,000 pixel custom map made by Jake that you will be able to describe to him. And keyword is Akmotu, which is Jake's Twitch screen name, which stands for All-Knowing Master of the Universe, of course. And so we got a 5-minute counter going, guys. So please go ahead and enter the keyword in the chat. And then, yeah, what's this riddle? I'm excited.
Oh, it's the riddle that I asked you the other day. I'm trying to actually find it because I can't remember the wording. About the DNA and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, I remember you said that, and I think my answer was I have no fucking idea.
Yeah, let me find this thing real quick.
Okay, while you're looking for that, just another reminder that FGCon is October 12th through the 14th, guys. So if you don't, let me see if I can get, I think it's just FG-Con, Leroon?
Yeah, I think it's FG-Con 13 or something like that.
So I'm going to copy this riddle into the Twitch chat, and then I'll read it out loud.
Okay.
Riddle of the day. A group of 6 people all share genetic information. In that same group, 2 of them share no genetic information. How is this possible?
Oh, yeah. How is that possible? Does anybody know? Type it in if you know.
A group of 6 people all share genetic information. In that same group, 2 of them share no genetic information. How is this?
I think I know a stupid answer.
There's a question from Diablo Bob too. How do you feel about meta plots versus transparent story? Which normally comes first for you, the narrative or the map? How do you organize? I guess it's 4 questions. How do you organize story development so that you don't lose the purpose of each quest or side story?
Can you repeat that one more time? I was reading Twitch
Yeah,
chat,
so
not 100% paying attention.
Mom's mom, dad's dad. Mom, dad,
Yeah,
and 4 kids.
the 2 are the parents of the children. It's 4 kids and a mom and a dad.
Oh, and the mom and the dad aren't related by DNA. There you go.
Boom shakalaka.
How do
I
you
was going to
feel
say
about...
two people aren't wearing pants.
That could also, well, at least we know that was true at a time before because they have 4 kids. How do you feel about meta plots versus transparent story? Obvious
Let's do
story
them one
arc.
at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I weave a lot of shit together. There's always a transparent element to the story because there has to be something visual, available for the players to interact with. And then, depending on the nature of the story, there's always going to be underlying things. I don't really want to answer this question in relation to the current adventure that I'm writing because I give away a huge fucking spoiler. But I'm hoping that says it right there, is that there's always like an upfront thing to do. And then I always throw in not just 1 and not just 2, a wide variety of what I like to call wrenches. And essentially, they're plot points where the players are like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And then they have to fucking react to it. And then just when they think they're on top of it, another one fucking comes up and they're like, God damn. Okay, cool. The benefit to this from a gameplay standpoint is it provides replayability. If the adventure is written correctly, I say correctly based on my standards. That doesn't necessarily apply to everyone else. But if I write the adventure correctly in my mind, there is a massive, not massive, maybe is the wrong word, but there's a significant amount of replay value because of those wrenches that get thrown into the seemingly transparent narrative. The narrative for this adventure is always going to be the same. The characters need to get on the ship and either A, destroy it or keep it themselves. That I don't mind sharing. How they go about it, though, is where it gets fucking crazy. So, and the interaction between the characters themselves and if the players are playing their own characters that don't adhere to the recommended story arcs or they're just foregoing the pre-generated characters at all, that element of the adventure is thrown out the window because it's kind of relying on the idea that either pre-gens are used or the archetypes that I provide are used. But if the DM decides to forego either of those 2 things, then it does sort of remove a significant element from the story. And I try to make that apparent and known up front. But again, the secondary purpose of this adventure module is not just to provide the adventure, but let's say a DM wants to just use this airship for his own purpose in his own campaign. Well, then there's a version of the version of the airship that's like fully decked out and like ready to use in a separate campaign is slightly different than the version of the airship that's in the adventure. Kind of like campaign mode versus multiplayer mode, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Okay.
What was the second question?
Before we get to that, let's draw the winner because the timer has expired.
Ooh, yeah.
So
Okay,
our
cool.
winner of Jake's custom map is Knight 5150. Boom.
Sweet.
Right on.
Congratulations. So Knight is on my Discord. Yeah, just PM me your email, and then I will make sure Jake gets that. And then he'll email you, and you guys can discuss the map. So congrats on that, and thanks for giving that prize away, Jake. That's very nice.
Yeah, my pleasure.
His other questions were, I think you already answered this one. Which normally comes first for you, narrative or the map? You already talked about that, didn't you?
I mentioned it, and it's not technically. I guess it's not always the same, but in this instance, normally the first thing that comes is the kernel of the idea, like the actual like fun scenario thing that I think would be badass, and that's like the seed, and then I start going from there. In some cases, it's the map. In some cases, it's the actual storyline. It all depends on what the actual original origin idea was. So in this instance, it was the story. That it was the idea, and then the story, and then the map. In previous adventures, it's been the idea, the map, and then the story. So it all depends.
Gotcha. Hey, Skill, thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. His last question was, how do you organize story development so that you don't lose purpose of each quest or side story?
I use Scrivener a lot, and I'm constantly comparing the existing ideas that I've written down to ideas that kind of like stem from it, and then I always make sure they're backwards compatible. So I've run into this a few times with this current adventure where I had an original idea, and then through more research and writing and whatnot, a secondary or a tertiary idea had evolved from that original one, and it evolved so far away that it didn't really match up with that original idea. So it's recognizing that, taking it one little step at a time, and then constantly comparing it back to the original thing that got you writing this in the first place.
Gotcha.
I hope that answers that question.
It answered
Which
it
is
for
why
me.
that's what, like, also another tip I would say is if you're not on a deadline, if someone's not like telling you like, I need this from you now, if you're not on that deadline, give yourself however long it takes. That's one thing I always tell my players. It's like, they're like, I want to search around for this thing. And I'm like, okay. Because I use time as an element in my games. I go, how long do you want to spend? And they're like, well, what do you mean? How long do I want to spend? They go, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Real quick tip. If I'm ever your DM and I ever ask you, how long do you want to spend doing this task? The correct answer to always succeed is as long as it takes. I want to spend as long as it takes. I'm searching for the secret door. How long do you want to spend? As long as it takes. And then if something were to come up between now and as long as it took, like a patrol happens across you or the floor starts falling out from under you, then we address that as it comes. But if there's no particular threat and you're like, I don't know, 5 minutes, that DC is going to be significantly higher. And if you say a half an hour, that DC is going to be lower. And if you say as long as it takes, there is no DC. You will find it.
Nice. I'm gonna remember that.
You know. Yeah.
All right, cool.
But yeah, if you're writing an adventure, spend as long as it takes to get the solidity of your idea down onto the page, because that will translate into the gameplay. And the players will notice how fluid and smooth it flows will come across in how much time you've invested. Even if that's you running a pre-gen adventure, buying something off the bookshelf and running it yourself. Spend as long as it takes so that you know that adventure just as well as if you had written it yourself.
Right. Cool. Excellent.
Fucking A.
Diablo Bob says thank you ×3, by the way. He was the one that asked all those questions. I just want to mention to everyone that next week's show, we're going to discuss all of the Fantasy Grounds groups and how you can use them. Discord, Twitter, Facebook, any other ones you guys want to talk about. Hoping there'll be somebody who asks or knows about Reddit, because I don't use Reddit. I mean, I'm on Reddit. I have an account there, but I don't use it. But we're going to talk about all the different Fantasy Grounds forums, Fantasy Grounds College. We're going to talk about all the different ways that you can find out information and discuss with other like-minded people things about Fantasy Grounds, how to get answers to stuff that you can't find answers for and stuff like that. So we'll do a show about that. And then 2 weeks from today, we're going to have Ben from Sirenscape. I just confirmed that with him moments before we started tonight's show. He lives in Australia, so it's going to be like Monday at noon for him, but we'll be regular time on Sunday night. He's going to come on and talk to us about Sirenscape. He was in the game chat on Friday, and he tweeted out, for those of you that don't know, this is the guy that created Sirenscape, the sound thing that we use. And he tweeted out, it was nice to see somebody finally using Sirenscape properly in a D&D game or something like that. And so he kind of gave me props, and I said, hey, do you want to come on the show? And he said, yeah. So we're going to have him here, and that's going to be exciting. Any other final words from any of you three before we say goodnight to everyone?
I'm pretty good.
No, I'm great too. I'm kind of excited about, playing a game with Jake now. Not that I don't like playing games with you, Rob, but I think
Star
Jake
69.
might be our favorite.
Hashtag 69. Well, Jake, thank you so much for coming. How can people? I know that you said that you're not on social media, but that you're planning a return. But how can people find you at this point? Where would they be able to get a hold of you if they so chose?
I am currently active on the Fantasy Grounds College Discord server, and I am currently active on the Rob Tui Discord server, both of which amazing communities with a very colorful group of people participating in all the craziness that Leroon and Rob have facilitated. And I highly recommend that if you're not on either platforms, hop on and join in and get with everyone else who's like-minded and playing the game. And I happen to be there. And if you want to throw me a message, by all means, hit me up.
All right, so Jake can be found by his screen name on either FGC or my Discord. Same name as he is here on Twitch. So it's Akmotu, and the easy way to remember that is AKMOTU is all-knowing master of the universe. So just that's how I remember it. And I didn't know that until he told me, and then I was like, oh, now I'll never misspell it. So thanks to you, Jake, for coming by and dropping some knowledge on us. Congrats to all the prize winners. Thanks to my co-hosts, Fury Fate and Leroon. And I will be on stream tomorrow at 6 p.m. doing the module creation Monday, as I always do. So I hope to see you all back here then. And I'm not going to do the normal announcements tonight because I'm super tired, so I'm just going to end the show. But thanks to everybody for coming tonight, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next time. Until then, good gaming, everybody.